Alright, so this is the Cirrus aircraft that we have here at Purdue. It's a 6-cylinder engine and it has 2 batteries and 2 alternators, which is very good when it comes to safety. If one fails, you always have the other one. It's also equipped with a caps in the back so you can pull the parachute if in need of emergency. The Cirrus aircraft is also equipped with a cast-ring nose wheel, which is not very good when it comes to landing. And the Cirrus aircraft tends to wear through a lot more wheels than a lot of other aircraft. So this is a Cirrus aircraft we have here. It's equipped with the G1000. A lot of things about the Cirrus, a lot of people say that it's not something that students should learn on, but definitely can be used as a learning aircraft here. But a lot of things people like about the Cirrus is that it's equipped with a lot of safety precautions like the seat belts and the CAPS parachute. G1000 helps students to quickly assess what's going on in the airplane, and it's very, very informational. So first we have the airspeed strip here, altitude strip, and we also have our HSI down here, and it's very bright, and it helps everyone. It helps students in the cockpit to really figure out what's going on with their airplane and to easily get to where they need to go. And then on this side we have more of the GPS side, and this is how students can navigate from one airport to another.
This is the Piper Arrow. It's equipped with a 4-cylinder Lycoming IO 360 engine. It has 200 horsepower, so the same as the Cirrus. Some differences between the Cirrus and the Arrow is it only has 1 battery and 1 alternator. And it also has easier timing cycles because the starter is in the front of the engine instead of the back compared to the Cirrus. So it's a little bit easier to start the engine. It has a steerable nose wheel, which means you can turn the plane with just the rudders and not having to use the brakes. So we were talking to the maintenance people, and they said these tires will last them up to 600 hours, which is a lot more than the Cirrus, which go about every 100 to 200 hours. Some other differences with the Arrow is it's steam. It has all steam gauges on the inside, so it's a little bit easier to learn on, and it flies a little bit slower than the Cirrus, so it allows for students to learn how to fly the actual aircraft quicker and be able to fly by themselves quicker.
On a cost perspective, the Cirrus aircraft cost $200 per hour, while the Arrow over here only costs about $110 per hour. That's a 45% change between each of those hourly rates, which is quite a bit of a change there. But the reasons for this is the Cirrus aircraft has a lot more maintenance and a lot more things that can go wrong with it. It's really complex, but not necessarily complex, but it's complex in the electrical perspective, while this aircraft over here, the Arrow, doesn't have as much electronics and doesn't have the G1000 and other possible things that could go wrong. Here we have the Cirrus aircraft. It's made out of a fiberglass wing, which has positive and negative side of that. If there were something to fall onto the wing and poke a hole in it, it's a lot harder process to go through because our maintenance staff would have to contact Cirrus, then they would have to come up with a plan on how to go about fixing that specific hole in the aircraft, and then it's a lot longer process than if a hole was supposed to get poked onto a metal aircraft.
So in the Arrow, they actually had the maintenance people we were talking to drop the seat on accident onto the wing and poke the hole, and they were able just to unrivet the sheet metal and get a new piece and stick it on there, instead of the whole process of going through and talking with Cirrus to try to figure out how to fix the composite aircraft. So from talking to the maintenance people, we determined that the Cirrus aircraft was a lot safer with the 2 batteries, 2 alternators, the airbags and the seat belts, the parachute. Well, the Arrow is a lot easier to maintain because there's less parts. There's 2 less cylinders in the Cirrus, which means less spark plugs and everything else that goes into a cylinder. And the landing gear on the Arrow is a little bit more user-friendly because in the Cirrus, since you cannot steer the nose wheel, You have to use braking on the runway to kind of steer it where you want to go. So sometimes students forget to take their feet off the brakes on landing and create bald spots, which doesn't happen very often on the Aero. But with it, all in all, the Cirrus is a safer aircraft. It has more technology. It's easier for students to fly and be safer in it. It's a faster aircraft than the Aero, but the Aero is not as safe. For example, they had an Aero crash on a golf course because the student forgot to switch tanks. Well, in the Cirrus, they have the Garmin system that tells you when to switch tanks so you cannot forget. So we determined that the Cirrus is a safer aircraft to fly. It's a lot more expensive, but the Aero is a lot less to maintain and easier plane to learn how to fly. So could you talk about training students in the Cirrus versus the Warrior or Aero?
So I'd say the biggest difference with the Cirrus training is that the Cirrus is quite a bit faster. It's a little bit harder to get your speed under control and get it slowed down. And then that also causes some problems when you're coming into land, because if you come in a little bit too fast, then that causes some issues. I'd say the Cirrus are a little bit harder to land well because of the speeds that it has and the way that it flares and the perspective that it has. And so I'd say that would probably be the biggest difference as far as doing maneuvers and things like that. The Piper products seem to be a lot nicer to be able to do maneuvers because they have a tendency to kind of return to their original flight path a lot better than the Cirrus. The Cirrus tend to get to a certain attitude and get stuck there, so you really have to fly through the maneuvers a lot more.
In regards to teaching on glass cockpit versus steam gauges, any difference you observe with that?
I'd say that the biggest thing when the students transition into the steam gauges is that their situational awareness is kind of poor, because with the G1000 you have so much information that is right there, and I kind of joke that it kind of makes people who are weak instrument pilots really, really good pilots, but you see the weaknesses come out when you get to the